My name is Elena Brooks. I'm 46 years old, and I work as a hospice nurse in a quiet town called Maple Hollow, just outside Asheville, North Carolina. I've spent most of my life taking care of people during their final days. I've always felt like it was sacred work, being with someone as they leave this world, holding their hand when no one else can, whispering prayers when the room is still. I never imagined I would come so close to death myself. It happened on March 20th, 2024. It was a chilly morning, and I had just finished checking in on a patient. I felt a little strange that morning, lightheaded, short of breath, but I brushed it off. I thought maybe I was dehydrated or just tired. Being a nurse, you tend to push through things, always focused on others. But that morning, as I walked down the hallway of the care home, everything changed. I felt a crushing pain in my chest, and suddenly, the floor wasn't under me anymore. The world tilted, sounds faded, and then, nothing. They told me later I had suffered a massive pulmonary embolism. A blood clot had traveled to my lungs and stopped my heart. I was gone, clinically dead, for more than 33 minutes. The emergency team did all they could. But during that time, while my body lay still, something extraordinary happened, that I found myself somewhere else. At first, it felt like drifting, floating in a place with no edges. Full of radiant light, it sounded me with a warm feelings. The light kept getting brighter as I float into a tunnel full of colorful light. No pain, no fear, just a deep quiet that wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I didn't feel lost. I felt watched. Not in a scary way, but in a comforting way. Like someone knew me. All of me. Every thought, every wound, every prayer I'd ever whispered for my patients, even the ones I had forgotten. And then, I saw him. Jesus. I didn't see his face clearly. His presence was like a light, but not like any light here on earth. It wasn't harsh. It was soft and golden and alive. The moment I came near him, something inside me broke open. All the years of grief, fear, guilt, and tiredness melted. I didn't speak, but he knew everything I wanted to say. Just being with him filled me with a joy that felt like it would burst out of my chest. I felt more alive in that moment than I ever had when I was living. He looked at me with eyes I couldn't see but somehow still felt, and said, "Elena, there's something I want you to see." And then he reached out, not with a hand like we know, but with something deeper, and when I took it, we began to move. We didn't walk. We just were somewhere else. A new place. A spiritual place. And I knew, with everything in me, this was real. As soon as we moved, I felt like we stepped through a veil, like something invisible had been peeled back from the world I thought I knew. What I saw next stunned me. Jesus brought me to what looked like the edge of a great battlefield, but it wasn't like any war I'd seen in a movie or read about in history books. This battle was invisible to human eyes. It was happening all around people, every moment of every day, and most of us had no idea. There were angels, tall and shining like living flames, and they were fighting creatures that looked like shadows. The darkness they carried wasn't just black. It was cold and hateful and heavy, like it wanted to pull everything good into it and smother it. I could feel that these dark things had one goal: to stop people from praying. Jesus didn't have to explain it with words. I just knew. Every time someone tried to pray, the shadows would rush in, whisper lies like, "It doesn't matter," or "God isn't listening," or "You're too tired." And most of the time, people believed those lies. They would close their eyes for just a second, and then the phone would ring, or their mind would wander, or they'd suddenly feel sleepy or distracted. And the prayer would vanish, unfinished. That's when I started crying, not because I was afraid, but because I saw how hard the enemy worked to stop even the smallest prayer. And yet, I also saw what happened when someone did pray. Even the weakest whispered prayer, just a soft, "Jesus, help me," sent out a burst of light like a lightning strike. It cracked through the shadows. It pushed them back. And the angels would rise up with new strength. They would move faster, strike harder, because the prayer gave them permission to act. It gave them access. Power. I remember watching one scene where a mother was sitting alone in her kitchen, just crying silently. She didn't even speak out loud. She just thought, "God, please help my son." And that one thought, that prayer, it sent a wave of power across the battlefield. A demon that had been wrapping itself around her son's mind was knocked backward. Angels surged in. It was like watching love break through stone. I turned to Jesus, overwhelmed. I asked, "Why don't people know this?" He looked at me with sadness and love in his eyes. "Because the enemy wants them to forget," he said. "They don't see that prayer is not about fancy words or long hours. It's about connection. It's about authority. When my name is spoken in truth, heaven moves. But the enemy covers their eyes with doubt, distraction, and discouragement." I felt a deep ache in my heart. All the times I had thought my prayers didn't matter, all the times I had told myself I was too tired or too busy, I saw now that every prayer had been a weapon, a light, a key. Jesus then showed me a wall, huge and dark, with families trapped behind it. The wall was built from pain, addiction, fear, and lies. But every time someone prayed, a piece of that wall crumbled. Not all at once, but slowly, faithfully. And over time, the wall would break, and freedom would come. He looked at me again and said, "Tell them, Elena. When you go back, tell them that their prayers matter. That even when they feel weak, I am strong. Even when they whisper, I hear them." I didn't want to leave. Being with Jesus felt like sunlight pouring into my soul. But something inside me knew he was preparing me to return. There was more he wanted to show me. More I needed to understand before going back. I don't know how long we stayed there, watching the spiritual battles. Time didn't feel the same in that place. It wasn't rushing like it does here. Everything moved with meaning, not speed. Jesus never looked hurried, but he had purpose in every step. Like everything he showed me was exactly what I needed to see. He brought me next to what looked like an open window into the world I had come from. I could see different homes, schools, hospitals, churches, ordinary places filled with ordinary people. But then, like a layer was pulled away, I saw the spiritual layers beneath them. I saw a little girl praying beside her bed, and in the spirit realm, that small prayer lit up the room like a sunrise. Darkness shrank back. Peace flowed in. Then I saw a man sitting in traffic, gripping the steering wheel, whispering a quick, frustrated prayer, "God, I can't do this anymore." Even that prayer, just a moment of surrender, set off a ripple of movement in the spirit. Angels moved toward him, ready to help. It made me realize something powerful. Heaven doesn't wait for perfect words. It just waits for a sincere heart. Jesus turned to me, and I could feel his heart, how deeply he longed for people to know him, not just know about him. He said gently, "They think I am far away, but I am not. I am as close as their breath. But they must reach for me." Then he showed me something I didn't expect. He took me to a church. Not just any church, but one I recognized from my town. I'd been there a few times. It was a beautiful old building, filled with kind people. But in the spirit, I saw something heartbreaking. The people were singing and smiling, but their prayers were thin and distracted. Their thoughts were scattered. Some were scrolling through phones, others were busy comparing themselves, and many just looked tired. The room was full, but the spiritual atmosphere was dim. And then, I saw one elderly woman in the back, sitting quietly with her eyes closed. She wasn't moving her lips, but her heart was deeply connected. She was interceding, for her family, for the youth in the church, for healing. And from her rose a beam of pure light that lit up the entire building. Jesus said, "One heart fully turned to me can shift an entire atmosphere. Never underestimate a faithful soul." I was undone. I started thinking about all the people I cared for as a nurse. How many were too weak to speak, too tired to pray with words? But now I knew their quiet longing, their inner cry, their whispers of Jesus, they counted. And I realized how many people feel ashamed, thinking they don't pray right. Jesus told me there's no right or wrong way when it comes from the heart. Then he said something that struck me so deeply, I've never forgotten it. The enemy doesn't fear loud voices. He fears surrendered hearts. At that moment, I felt something inside me shift. I understood that prayer wasn't just a spiritual discipline, it was a lifeline. Not just to get answers, but to stay connected to the very one who is the answer. And suddenly, I felt this burning desire to go back. Not because I wanted to leave his presence, but because I wanted to tell others. I wanted to tell you, but before I could say anything, he said, "There's one more thing you must see." Everything faded again, and suddenly we were standing at the edge of what looked like a giant city. But it wasn't made of buildings or street. It was made of light. Living, pulsing light. The closer we got, the more I could feel it. It wasn't just beauty. It was love. Pure, undiluted love. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I didn't want to blink. Jesus looked at me, and I knew this place was part of heaven. Maybe not the deepest parts, but still. I was seeing something holy. I couldn't step forward. Not yet. But I could feel the invitation. It was like heaven itself was whispering, "This is what you were made for." But then, Jesus turned me away from it, just for a moment. And that's when I saw something I will never forget. We were suddenly looking down at earth again. It was as if the sky had peeled open. I could see people in their homes, their cars, in hospitals, sitting on benches, lying in beds, walking alone at night. So many faces. So many hearts, and hovering over them, I could see angels waiting, just waiting, ready to act, ready to protect, to comfort, to guide. But most of them weren't moving. I turned to Jesus, confused. "Why aren't they helping?" He answered, with such sadness in his voice, "Because no one has asked. No one prayed." That hit me like a wave. All those people, carrying heavy burdens, drowning in loneliness, facing danger, and angels were standing by, hands ready, just waiting for a cry, a whisper, anything that opened the door. But most stayed silent. Not because they were wicked, but because they were tired, distracted, numb. I began to weep. I saw a boy in a hospital bed. His mother had fallen asleep beside him. She had prayed for hours, but now she was too exhausted to go on. Still, her prayers were echoing. They didn't fade when she stopped. They lingered, like music hanging in the air. I saw an angel still moving because of the words she had spoken earlier, and I understood something that changed me forever. Prayers don't die. Even when we forget, they don't disappear. They go before us. They circle the ones we love. They keep working, Jesus said. Tell them, Elena. Tell them their words matter. Even when they feel small. Even when they think they're not holy enough or strong enough. Tell them to speak. I listen. That's when I felt something shift again. Not around me, but inside me. Like my spirit was being pulled back, like I was being told it was time. I looked at Jesus with so much longing. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay. I wanted to fall at his feet and stay in that love forever. But he leaned close to me and said, "You have more to do. What I showed you, don't keep it for yourself. They need to know. They're waiting for someone to remind them." I started to cry, but it wasn't sadness. It was something deeper. A mix of peace and purpose. I didn't know what was ahead, but I trusted him. With everything in me, I trusted him. And then, in an instant, I was falling. Like being pulled through time, through water, through light and shadow, and then, I woke up. When I woke up, everything was blurry. Lights, voices, machines beeping. I was in the hospital, surrounded by nurses and doctors who looked both shocked and relieved. I could barely speak. My throat hurt from the breathing tube, and my body felt like it had been run over. But deep inside me, I was glowing. Not in a way you could see, but in a way I could feel. Something had changed. Everything had changed. They told me I had been clinically dead for over 33 minutes. My heart had stopped. They tried everything. Most people don't come back. And if they do, they don't come back like this. But I did. Because Jesus wasn't done with me. As I lay in that hospital bed, I remembered everything. The light, the love, the battle, the prayers. Every detail burned into my spirit like fire, gentle, but unstoppable. I couldn't stop crying, not out of fear or sadness, but because I had been seen. I had been known. And now, I had a purpose. When I finally returned home to Maple Hollow, I wasn't the same woman who had left. I went back to my job as a hospice nurse, but now I prayed over every person I cared for, not with fancy words, but with real, quiet, honest prayers. Sometimes I would just whisper the name Jesus while holding their hand. Sometimes I would pray in my car before walking into a room. And I saw things start to change. Peace would come into the room like a warm wind. Anger would lift off of families sitting in grief. People who were afraid to die found comfort they couldn't explain, and it wasn't me. It was Him. It was prayer. It was the power of calling on His name. I started a journal, writing down every moment where I felt that same spiritual movement I had witnessed beyond the veil. I started telling my story, even when my voice trembled. Not everyone believed me. Some rolled their eyes or changed the subject. But I kept sharing because I wasn't telling a tale, I was telling the truth. Jesus showed me something most of us never see, that the real war isn't outside, it's inside. In our minds, in our hearts, and prayer is how we fight back. Not yelling, not striving, just whispering His name and meaning it. Now, I pray for my little town every day. I pray when I drive by the school. I pray when I see a mother walking with her child. I pray when I fold laundry or water my plants. And sometimes I still feel Him close, not with my eyes but with my spirit. And I smile, because I know He's there. Always. So if you're reading this, or listening to this, I want you to know this. Your prayers matter. Even when you're tired. Even when you feel far from God. Even when all you can say is help. Say it because heaven is listening. And Jesus is closer than you think. Thank you for walking with me through my testimony. If it touched your heart, if it made you feel less alone, or reminded you that you can pray and it does matter, I invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to this channel for more testimony like mine. Real, honest, full of hope. You never know, the next one might be the reminder someone else needs too. And until then, don't stop praying.